Superman, Secret Origin. The story begins with a young Clark Kent playing football on a hot summer day. His friends tell him to go long, and he starts running to catch the ball. His friend Pete rushes toward him and tries to take the ball back, but Clark stands firm and doesn't move. The impact was so powerful, it felt like Pete had just hit a truck, and he fell to the ground screaming in pain. An ambulance was called to take Pete to the hospital, while Clark's dad showed up to take him home. The next day, the boys meet again at school, but Pete wasn't mad at Clark. As it turns out, all the girls in their classroom wanted to sign his cast, and he became popular all of a sudden. Lana Lang, one of Clark's closest friends, drops by, asking if they can talk, but he wasn't in the mood. Out of nowhere, something strange happens, and his X-ray vision triggers, allowing him to see through Pete's cast and observe his broken bones. Clark panics and starts running, but Lana chases him down. He tells her what just happened, that he was able to see right through their skin and see everyone's skeletons. But this didn't spook Lana at all. She already knows that Clark is not like the other boys, but rather special. When they were younger, they played hide-and-seek in the wheat fields, but Lana didn't see a giant combine heading toward her, and Clark rushed in at the last second and saved her life. The combine blades broke on his back, and both of them were unharmed, with Clark even saying he's stronger than steel. Lana tells him not to be afraid of his abilities, but rather to embrace them. However, he is worried about hurting the people around him. She leans closer and kisses him on the lips, but the intense moment causes Clark's eyes to overheat, and they shoot out a powerful blast of heat that burns the school's sign. Pretty soon, the firemen rushed to the scene and said this wasn't an accident, while Jonathan came to pick up his son again and take him home. After everything that happened recently, Jonathan thinks it might be a good idea to finally tell Clark the truth. His parents knew all along that he was special, but it wasn't because his powers started manifesting. They knew he was special the first time they met him, when his rocket crash-landed in the cornfields. At first, Clark was ecstatic to see the rocket and wanted to know where it came from, but his parents had no idea. But when he got a bit closer, the rocket came to life, and two figures appeared out of nowhere. They started talking, and said their names are Jor-El and Lara, and they are Clark's biological parents. They tell him the truth, that he was born on Krypton, a beautiful planet that fell victim to its unstable red sun, which ultimately destroyed it. They show him the sunstone crystal that contains the Kryptonian's entire history and legacy, and tell him he was sent here for a reason. His parents believe he will be protected on this new world and will be free to move among them, but he should never forget where he came from and that he isn't human. Hearing this infuriated Clark, and his eyes started shooting toward the holograms, but he only managed to damage the rocket's outer shell and break one of the crystals off. The next day, his mother used one of the broken crystals from the rocket to create special glasses for her son, ones that would help control his heat vision every time it triggers. Clark wasn't too thrilled about the glasses, and his friends immediately made fun of him. After school, Clark visits the town fair and helps Lana decorate her flower stand. He gets distracted, however, and sees a bunch of science books that catch his attention. Another young boy named Lex Luthor was selling his book collection because he had already memorized the best ones and wanted the money to get out of this town. Lex opened up one of his boxes and took out something, asking if Clark believed in extraterrestrials. This piece of green rock had devastating effects on Clark, and he immediately began feeling weak, causing him to fall over the bookstand and break the glass container. Clark said he was sorry and moved away, but he was still severely weakened and affected by the green rock. Out of nowhere, a storm engulfed the entire fair, and a tornado ravaged the place. Everyone rushed for their lives, but Lana fell on the ground and couldn't get up again. The tornado was inches away from her, and the vortex began to pull her away, but Clark rushed toward her and jumped to catch her. He managed to catch her in midair, and pretty soon they were both flying while trying to escape the vortex. But just as soon as his powers started manifesting, they disappeared just as quickly, and both of them began falling toward the ground. Luckily, Clark was able to float toward a nearby river, and they crash-landed in the water, unharmed. Lana wanted to show her gratitude for saving her life, and kissed the young Kent boy for a second time, but this time the crystal glasses came in handy. Clark returned home and told the crazy story to his parents, except the kissing part, and he slowly started to embrace his Kryptonian side and his powers. While his mother thinks that's a nice idea, she knows he's going to need stronger clothes. Luckily, she found some durable material inside the rocket and some designs that gave her an idea. With her son's help, she was able to cut the materials and create a special uniform for him to wear. The only problem is, Clark doesn't like it much, saying this is the first and last time he's ever going to wear this ridiculous suit. On the outskirts of Smallville, a man was recklessly driving his truck while enjoying a few beers. A pile of rocks was blocking the road, and he tried to stop, but something was wrong. His brakes weren't working anymore, so he tried to go around them, but sadly, he lost control and fell from the edge, heading straight for the river below. But out of nowhere, a young Superman flew towards him and was able to catch his car in the air. The man in the car was Lionel Luthor, who recently had a big fight with his son, Lex Luthor. Ever since his mother made him the suit, Clark had been keeping busy, patrolling Smallville and saving people from possible dangers, but he hated the suit. The next day at school, Clark told Lana that his best friend, Pete, had stopped asking him to play football or basketball, something they used to do every day. Lana, the only one who knew his secret, wanted to comfort him, kissing him on the cheek, but Clark freaked out and said he only saw her as a friend, nothing more. He overheard Pete talking to other classmates, saying they didn't invite him to play football anymore because he always avoided getting involved, as if he were afraid of getting injured. In fact, Clark was worried about injuring the ones around him. Out of nowhere, a group of 3 teenagers appeared, claiming they were from the future, the 30th century more precisely. They had traveled into the past because they wanted to meet the famous Clark Kent, but he had no idea what they were talking about. Clark was curious about the future, and the 3 teenagers offered to take him with them. They were part of a group of heroes called the Legion of Superheroes, and they did pretty much the same thing he was doing, stopping crime and helping people. Earth had become a space hub for many different alien races, but not everyone was happy about this. Human supremacists believed that aliens had invaded their planet and formed resistance groups to fight back, and the Legion of Superheroes was called in to deal with them. With Clark's help, they easily handled the supremacists, but some were not too thrilled about his presence in the future. Brainiac, the Legion's leader, said that by bringing Clark there, they could potentially change the course of history and prevent Clark from becoming the amazing person he was destined to become. The 3 time travelers recognized their mistake and the potential dangers, and they agreed to return Clark to his own timeline. Young Clark was extremely thrilled about the whole experience and couldn't wait to tell his parents about everything that had happened. Meanwhile, in another part of town, the police informed Lex Luthor that his father had sadly passed away from a heart attack, even though there were no medical records of him having a heart condition. But instead of grieving, Lex laughed about it, saying it was his last day in Smallville. He had always wanted to move to Metropolis, and now, thanks to the large insurance payout from his father's death, there was nobody left to stop him. After finishing high school, Clark Kent decides to move to Metropolis and start a new life. But life wasn't easy in the big city. Everybody was going somewhere, and people were much colder and meaner compared to the lovable folks in Smallville. He got a job as a reporter at the Daily Planet, but he was running late on his first day. Luckily, he catches one of the elevators going up, alongside a janitor working there by the name of Rudy Jones. Clark's suitcase accidentally opens, and everything falls out, including his lunch. The janitor mentions that he forgot his lunch today, and Clark offers to give his own for free, which he gladly accepts. On his way up, he meets Jimmy Olsen, an intern photographer who was delivering food and coffees for everyone in the office. Sadly, the Daily Planet wasn't doing too well and was on the verge of going bankrupt, but Lois Lane was more preoccupied with her boss publishing her newest story. Perry White introduces the two of them, saying that Clark is replacing another reporter who left to work for a rival newspaper. Lois asks Clark to follow her downtown because Lex Luthor, the town's billionaire, is having a press conference, even though the Daily Planet is not allowed on the property due to their bad press in the past. On their way out, Rudy Jones, the janitor, says he forgot his bus pass and asks Clark if he can lend him some money to go back home. Clark was happy to help the janitor a second time. Over at the LexCorp building, Clark helps Lois jump over the fence, but he used a little too much force to push her. Using a disguise, Lois was able to sneak inside the building while Lex and his scientists were revealing their newest robot, called Metallo. Because Miss Lane was a famous reporter, the guards uncover her disguise and want to arrest her, but she runs away. During the chase, the guards interfere with the demonstration, causing Metallo to trip while grabbing one of the helicopters on the roof and push Lois off the building. Clark was on the ground with the rest of the people and saw what happened. He snuck between the alleys and removed his clothes, revealing the Superman suit underneath. Then he quickly flew toward the building and grabbed Lois while she was falling to her death. She didn't understand what was happening or how any of this was possible, but they weren't out of danger just yet. The helicopter was also falling right on top of them, but Clark grabs it with just one hand and then puts it on the ground gently alongside Lois. She asked who he was, and he said he was just someone who wants to help. The people were curious and quickly surrounded Superman, but when the police wanted to ask a few more questions, Clark quickly flew away, leaving Lois wanting more. After becoming the richest man in Metropolis, Lex Luthor became the city's benefactor, organizing a lottery where he picks one random person each day, offering to change his or her life forever. People gather every day outside his building to greet and cheer for the benevolent billionaire. One such day, Lex and his team choose a man named Rudy Jones, who works as a janitor for the Daily Planet. Meanwhile, at the Daily Planet, everybody gathered around Lois Lane and wanted to ask her questions about Superman after he saved her life one day earlier. Mr. Luthor sent 2 of his guards to escort her, saying their boss wants to talk to her directly. The same goes for Clark Kent as well. Lois accepted because she'd been waiting to interview the richest man in Metropolis for months now, but never got an opportunity. The second Lex walked through the door, she started bombarding him with questions, accusing him of many acts of corruption and illegal activities. But Lex himself was curious to know why the Daily Planet was painting Superman as the town hero, when every other newspaper in the city was saying he's a fraud. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the building, Rudy Jones was being escorted by one of the scientists, but he couldn't help but notice tanks filled with a pink-colored substance. One of these tanks was leaking, and Rudy drops his donut right on the contaminated floor. He doesn't notice, and takes another bite, infecting his body with the pink substance. Sadly, this has horrifying effects on his body, and he begins attacking other people, looking to satisfy an uncontrollable hunger. After feeding on the life force of several people, Rudy blasts into Lex Luthor's office, saying that something smells good here. Clark was able to sneak away, change into his Superman suit, and then come back, hitting Rudy at full force and taking him outside. Together, they break the main gate at the entrance, while Rudy is able to bite Superman on the neck, feeding on his life force. This instantly weakens him, but even if he was drained of all energy, Superman was able to defend himself and punch Rudy in the face, sending him flying into a nearby car. The pink monster claims that Superman tastes a lot better than the others and lasts a lot longer as well. Clark powers up his heat vision and hits Rudy with a direct blast, causing him to overheat and the car behind him to explode. He then uses his ice breath to completely freeze and incapacitate him. The people cheer for Superman and call it a miracle, but Lex Luthor doesn't believe in miracles. He accuses Superman of invading Metropolis, asking if he's even human. Later that day, Clark wanted to think and observe the city from above, but while sitting on top of the Daily Planet building, he sees Jimmy Olsen about to jump. Luckily, that wasn't actually the case. It turns out Jimmy wanted to do the same thing as he did. He also wanted to leave Metropolis and go back to his hometown. But before leaving, he asks Superman if he can take one final picture, and Clark agrees. This picture was used by the Daily Planet when Lois Lane wrote an article on Superman, and Jimmy was hired as the newspaper's photographer. John Corbin, a highly decorated soldier in the U.S. Army, visits Lois Lane and asks why the flowers he sent her are in the garbage bin. Corbin has a crush on Lois, but she says they've only gone out once, and she doesn't even like him. However, her father likes him a lot and wants the 2 of them to be together. Corbin wants them to try a second time and grabs her hand tightly, saying he doesn't like to be ignored. But he was hurting her, and she asks him to let her go, when out of nowhere Clark Kent shows up and says he and Lois are supposed to have lunch together to discuss a story. Clark introduces himself and offers to shake John Corbin's hand, while Corbin says his name is Sergeant Corbin. The 2 men shake hands, but Corbin feels a sharp pain in his hand. Clark squeezes his hand really tight, causing Corbin severe pain, while he is in total disbelief that a dork like Clark could be this strong. Corbin finally decides to leave, unsure of what just happened and how Clark was able to squeeze his hand so tightly. Even Lois Lane is shocked, saying that Corbin is one of the deadliest soldiers in the U.S. Army, calling him a killer. She's never seen anyone stare him down before. The 2 of them go out for lunch, during which Lois tells her that Corbin is working for her dad, who has been trying to set them up ever since she turned 18. For General Lane, Corbin is like the son he never had. Unfortunately, he was unlucky and was blessed with 2 daughters, although Lois's sister passed away a long time ago. She asks Clark who he really is, wondering how he can be this stumbling guy one minute, and then this confident and insightful man the next. Clark knocks over a glass of milk on purpose, trying to play further into the role of the dorky colleague. But something catches his attention. A big fire erupts somewhere in the city, and he leaves immediately, leaving Lois to pay the bill.
Every newspaper in town painted Superman as the town's hero, even calling him the next evolution of man. But not everyone was thrilled about this. Lex Luthor couldn't help but despise the Man of Steel, calling everyone foolish for putting him on a pedestal. He blames the Daily Planet and everyone working there, including Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, for giving Superman free publicity. Lex says the relationship between his daughter and Superman is unnatural, and asks General Lane to follow him because he wants to show him something. Lex calls Superman dangerous and claims he can not only stop him, but also kill him. A recent confrontation between the Man of Steel and Rudy Jones, aka the Parasite, made him realize that Superman is actually extraterrestrial. Lex found a power source that can negate Superman's powers. He created special armor called Metallo, powered by a green rock that can harm the Man of Steel, but he needs someone to pilot it. John Corbin volunteers to pilot the armor, and the general is thrilled. Later in the day, Superman sees smoke on top of a skyscraper and rushes immediately, but there isn't any fire. General Lane used fake smoke to lure him and says he wants to talk. The 2 of them go inside the building, and the general interrogates Superman, asking why he is in Metropolis and what he wants from them. Superman says he just wants to use his abilities and be a productive member of society, just like the general and his men. But the general doesn't trust him and questions him about his intentions with his daughter, Lois Lane. Clark begins feeling uncomfortable and wants to leave, but the general threatens him, saying that if he walks out the door, he will be an enemy of the United States Army. Superman starts walking out politely, trying to get to the exit, but he is stopped by a group of soldiers who threaten him. They begin shooting at him, but it's no use. Bullets bounce off the Man of Steel like popcorn. With a swift punch to the ground, he clears his path, but he isn't out of danger just yet. John Corbin jumps him from behind, using Metallo, the armor created by Lex Luthor. He asks the soldiers to stand down and let him deal with Superman, but Clark is faster and dodges his attacks. He then grabs one of Corbin's arms and breaks it off, pinning him to the ground. But Metallo isn't done just yet. He opens a secret door exposing Superman to the lethal effects of green kryptonite. Clark instantly begins to feel sick and can barely stand, while the soldiers start firing at him. However, one of the bullets ricochets off Superman's forehead and lands directly on the kryptonite rock, causing the entire suit to overcharge. This leads to a powerful explosion, and Corbin falls to the ground unconscious. The soldiers continue to shoot at Superman, but because he is still weak from the kryptonite, he is forced to run away. Corbin is still alive, but barely breathing, while his colleagues call the ambulance. He is flown to the hospital by a military helicopter and rushed inside on a stretcher. Lex Luthor is waiting in the operating room, but he isn't worried at all. In fact, he claims he can save Sergeant Corbin while pulling a piece of kryptonite from his body. Luthor performs the operation on Corbin himself, claiming it's a success and that Corbin is alive. The soldiers scour the sewers, wondering how fast Superman can actually fly. Maybe he flew past them without their notice. But sadly, Clark is too weak to fly, and the soldiers eventually find him. He uses every ounce of energy left to ditch the soldiers and make a run for it, emerging on the surface right underneath one of the tanks. The attacks continue, while Superman asks the soldiers to cease fire because they could injure innocent bystanders, but they refuse to listen. He uses his ice breath to freeze their hands and prevent them from firing, but he forgets to watch his back, and someone throws a car at him, sending him crashing into a phone booth. Lex Luthor successfully saves Corbin's life, managing to merge his body with Metallo and creating the ultimate soldier. Metallo runs toward him at incredible speed and then jumps into the air, landing directly on Superman's body. But Superman isn't defeated just yet and lands a powerful punch, sending Metallo flying directly into one of the tanks. The soldiers want to help Metallo, but he tells them to back off and even attacks them. Suddenly, Lois Lane comes running out of the crowd and grabs Superman's hand, saying it's like a war on the streets. She begs him to leave, saying it's not safe because the military has some kind of meteorite that can hurt or even kill him. Metallo calls Superman a threat to the nation, one that could change everything, and he can't allow it. He tells him to listen to Lois and just leave. But Superman says he never gives up and punches Metallo in the face, removing his mask and exposing his disfigured face. Lois wants to help Superman, but Metallo tells her to stay out of this because it's personal, and then tries to kill her with a powerful energy blast. But Clark steps in front and takes the full blow of the hit, saving her life. Even though Corbin traded his heart for a rock, he still says his heart beats for her. He just has a funny way of showing it. Hearing this, Superman uses his X-ray vision to scan Metallo's body and sees that even though he's half machine, he still uses his lungs to breathe. He then picks up a manhole cover, heats it up using his heat vision, and throws it toward Metallo, hitting him directly in the chest and damaging him. Superman gathers what's left of his strength and flies toward Corbin, grabbing him and flying straight up toward the sky at incredible speed. Superman takes him straight into space, where Metallo eventually runs out of oxygen and faints. Superman brings him back down to Earth and throws him against the ground directly at the feet of General Lane. The general orders his men to arrest Superman along with his daughter, but as they try to move, the people of Metropolis step in. They tell the soldiers to leave Superman alone because he helped them, while Metallo tried to harm them. The people are unsure what to do next and ask Superman for advice, but he tells them to stop searching for a great savior. Lex Luthor isn't one, and he isn't either. All of them are saviors, and even though he was given a special gift, they all have gifts as well, and need to use them to make their lives in Metropolis better. The effects of the kryptonite have now worn off, and Superman flies away, content that he was able to stop Metallo and keep everyone safe.